newest issue of my zine, which is up at the table, and it's called Treehouse. Earlier that day, she had left marks on my back while we were... Her fingernails were short but surprisingly sharp. Now she was scratching at her wrist with a safety pin. I saw the tour when they came through Chicago, which is where I'm from, in May, and I thought it was this really great idea, and I went to the website and I filled out an application, sent in my stuff, and I never expected that I'd actually be on the tour, but here I am, so I'm pretty excited. When I first became super serious about writing was around age 12. That's when I first started writing and publishing zines, and and also at that same age I started I had some poems in a couple different kids magazines, and then also school the school lit mag and stuff. So I was I guess pursuing more traditional publishing along with the self-publishing stuff at the same time. So it was really around age 12 when I just sort of dedicated my life to it, I guess.
Which a lot earlier than most.
Yeah, I know. And then it makes when I say I've been seriously writing for almost 30 years now, it probably makes people assume I'm older than I actually am, because I started pretty young. So
okay. Well, when did you learn about what a zine was, and when did you fall in love with it?
I think I have known what zines were since I was 9. I mean, I described it once of because of being in the early 90s, I described it once as the heady time when everyone and their uncle had a fanzine, and you could find them everywhere. They were in, you could go into a coffee shop and people would just leave their zines there for free, or and also around age 9 I started reading Sassy magazine, which back then it was a teen girls magazine, but it was kind of the hip one. And they had a section called Zine of the Month.
Oh.
So where you'd they'd do a paragraph profiling their a zine for that month's issue, and tell you how to send away for it and whatever. So I think it was a combination of just seeing them around and reading about them. And I was, even before that, I had made zines before I even really knew what they were. When I was really little, I would use my parents' typewriter, and just write little, I called them newsletters then. Mm-hmm. And my dad would make a few photocopies at his office and stuff, and I would give them to people. So then when I found out what zines were, I was kind of oh, I've already been kind of doing this, but I obviously changed the format somewhat once I started officially making zines. This is an excerpt from a poem called "I'll Try to Find You Left of the Dial." I sat like that in bedrooms, in back seats of cars with headphones, always in my own little corner of the world, trying to tune out my surroundings, surround myself with, escape. Soon enough, it wasn't enough. The seeking stretched past sound waves and stations into record stores with racks of fanzines where I read about local bands, or ones far off who might be near one day. I sought them out in churches, YMCAs, moose lodges, barns, and parking lots. Followed them into the basements of faded gray houses, the kind with scummy, wet couches on the front porches, beer bottles filled with cigarette butts, where I sat huddled into my hooded sweatshirt, my denim jacket, against the dank lake breeze that was ever present, no matter the season. Turned to sneaking into bars, learning what I could get away with. Learned I didn't need a fake ID if I had dark enough lipstick, a short enough skirt, Taught myself how to flirt when seeking for sound became seeking out. The bars and the basements were churches where I learned how to pray to the stage. Pray for sweat, heat, the briny bruise of someone's fingertips. For the girls and boys in the basements, back rooms, bathrooms, and soon enough, those boys and girls became the boys in the bands. The bathrooms became motels, hotels, tour vans. In sixth grade, I started writing this book that was supposed to be sort of initially it was like this sort of like survival guide for like tween and teen girls like who maybe were like a little bit, I don't want to say like, yeah, like I guess kind of misfits or whatever. It was kind of, but it had a lot of like prompts for journal writing in there, like mixed in with the other stuff. And it is sort of because journal writing was like, that was another thing that I've been, keeping a journal since I was really young. And that kind of, helped me both get into other kinds of writing, but also just like helped me, deal with, being a teenager. And so I started writing this book, and my language arts teacher, who was always really encouraging of me, um, like, suggested I send it to send it out for publication, and I did that summer of 94, like while I was on summer break. I was at the library, because wasn't like just submittable and stuff. And then I like went to the library and checked out the like writers, whatever they called I can't remember the name of those books that had all of the places, the publishing companies and contests and everything.
Like the writer's market, I think it was.
Yeah, writer's market. That was it. Yeah. So I went and I like found the ones that I thought sounded like they'd be most amenable to that type of thing. Sent out, cover letter, a manuscript. Like I think my dad helped me write the cover letter, but I, did everything else myself. And I didn't hear anything for months at all because most publishing houses don't really like read in the summer, But in the fall, I started hearing, I got a couple rejections. One of my manuscripts got like returned to sender, like the place didn't even exist anymore. But then I got a letter from Free Spirit Publishing in Minneapolis, who published books for kids and teenagers, and they were like, "Yeah, we think this is really cool," and they immediately said, "We think it's kind of disjointed." Like it was like two books together basically. So they said, would you be willing to like make some edits so it's just like focusing on the journal writing aspect? And I was like, sure. And so they they published that one. That one came out when I was 14. And then a couple years later, they asked me to write a second one, like a similar thing, but for like older teenagers, as opposed to like the first one's for like 9 to 12 ish. And so the next one was, more for the, like 13 to 17-year-old cohort. So that was more like age 14, because I started taking guitar lessons when I was 14. And that's like, I had played piano since I was a kid, like a little kid. But it was when I started playing guitar that I started like writing my own songs and stuff.
When did you learn the accordion?
That was in my 20s.
Okay.
And I just had like, I got this weird obsession with the chord. I don't know. I blame like, it was like partly because of Tom Waits and partly because of the Amelie soundtrack, I think. Like, and then I started, really wanting to learn to play the accordion. So I did. A week or so later, I'm on the phone with Amelia again. We're talking about whatever. I have not brought up Ashley or her bizarre statement, and I am not going to until Amelia says, "So, Ashley doesn't think you're homophobic anymore. Now she thinks you're gay." I feel like laughing, but don't. What could have possibly happened that made her opinion of me switch from homophobic to gay so quickly? I haven't even seen her since that night in the car. I, what? I say. Yeah, I know. She's weird, Amelia says. I don't know. We went to see Chasing Amy, and she said some of the girls in that movie remind her of you. I have not yet seen Chasing Amy, so I can neither confirm nor deny my similarity to anyone in the film. So, how does she explain my reasons for not sitting on her lap now? I ask. She thinks you were afraid that if you sat on her lap, she would have realized you were gay then and afraid she would have freaked out and gotten homophobic. For fuck's sake, what is with this chick? I wonder. Like, how would me sitting on her lap have made her realize I'm gay? Is there like a dykey way to sit on someone's lap? Did she think I was going to sit on her lap and turn around and start making out with her? I'm not even attracted to her. She is so not my type. Why do all straight girls assume every girl who likes girls is attracted to them? I do start laughing then, laughing so hard I'm wheezing into the phone and tears are running down my face.
I was thinking, it's a shame that we've got this neat little loop here, and it's not no one's gonna make use of it until I put it on another book, So I just decided at that point, well, I could basically set up the infrastructure for people maybe that aren't necessarily as organizationally inclined as I am, and in that way kind of give back to the indie press community.
So we're going to fast forward quite a bit here. The Perpetual Motion Roadshow. How did that come about?
That was when I was living in Chicago at the time, and I knew someone that had been on he was on one of the roadshow tours, and I went to see their stop in Chicago at Quimby's. I went to to see that event, and I just thought it was like the coolest thing. And yeah, I pretty much immediately like a month later maybe I sent my zines and my application. I mean, there wasn't really an official application, but I just sort of wrote to Jim Monroe and was like, I love what you're doing. I think I'm well suited for this type of thing, and and here's my stuff, and and yeah, and he chose me for the one. And it was the same year. Like, I saw them in, I think, April of 2003, sent him stuff in May, and then I was on the tour in September of that same year. So,
and you met Fred, or I should say Red Fright.
yes.
Was that the first you'd heard of the ULA?
Yeah, he was the first I'd heard of the ULA. It was directly because of my involvement with the roadshow that I found out and got connected with that.
And how did you end up joining?
I think I got I'm blanking on things like writer's market and the name of the guy who ran the ULA, like
Carl King Winclass.
I thought it was Carl, and then I was like, thought I was confusing him with someone. I knew it was Carl. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I got a letter from Carl, sending me more information, saying that he heard of me because of me being on tour with Red, and read my stuff and dug it and like wanted to know if I wanted to join. And at the time I was like, sure.
What are your thoughts on the group, sort of overall?
I mean, it was cool. There were a lot of you know, a lot of really, interesting people that were part of it. I think like anything, it's I mean, it never seemed like we were all the same style of writer or anything. But I feel like, anything when it gets to like any sort of group like that can be a great way to like connect people with each other who might have like commonalities and like, things like that. But then there's always the danger that it can get like too insular, And and I remember like when I was out in Cleveland for Phil Fest in 2006, someone like that wasn't that was just at, the event, like at some of the events, was talking to me, and she was saying that like, oh well, she thought the ULA was cool, but like there weren't like a whole lot of women in it. Like I was one of the few, like non-men. I think there were a few others, but like there just weren't. She was sort of asking me about that, and I was like, I don't think it was on purpose, but I wonder if like the sort of like the type of I never had any. I'm not saying that any of the guys in it were like problematic or anything. I just wonder if it like the sort of I don't know, like there was something about it that I think that maybe like some women were I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. Like I guess it's one of those things like, okay,
Was the attitude kind of hyper masculine in a way?
yeah, maybe that's what I'm saying. Kind of like that really like, gritty, like working class literature. There was like a lot of, that. And I don't think that individual members of the ULA were like that. But I think the image of it overall might have turned off some other, non-men, thinking maybe it's all going to be like a bunch of Bukowski types or something, like, yeah, that's what I was trying to say. So now your shitty ghost just haunts me, annoying me with might have beens. Buddy, if I hadn't loathed you, we would have been best friends. We were the same, ever reckless, drawn to self-demise, faithful only to the tools of our destruction, holding the whole world at arm's length, convinced no one would ever, for real, love us. The only thing that saved me is praising my tender, loving my holy wounds. There are so many things I should have asked you, like, hey, asshole, why did you do it? Like, hey, what did you want? What wounded your most secret, heedless heart that you wouldn't let yourself ask for? If you just painted your nails sparkle pink and let a girl peg you while you listen to pop punk, would you still be here? It's been a year now. If I could find your grave, I'd slam dance on it. I'd bring grave goods, leave offerings of glitter and pumpkin guts. I'd come with my spray paint and leave you slogans. 666 world is a fuck. Born to die. Young. Too late. Damn you. We were the last living punk rockers. Now you're dead and I'm just a poet. Asshole. I wanted to punch you, but I didn't wish you ghost. Fuck you. Who am I going to argue about music with now?
When you have a feeling or an idea that you want to express, how do you know whether it's a piece of prose, a poem, or a song?
Oh, I don't always. I mean, sometimes it's just like I mean, I will say that I rarely write songs these days. When I started focusing on poetry, like most of what would have become songs are now poems, even though my style of writing poems is usually very different from how I write song lyrics. It still like often comes from like the same kind of impulse. Um, like prose is not. I mean, again, no, it depends. There have been times when something could have gone either way, like been prose or poetry. Um, and I write a lot of prose poems too. I'm one of those weirdos. So like I don't always differentiate. I just like write something and I'm like, okay, like to me it's this, but if other people want to call it, whatever else. But I guess a lot of times like when I get an idea or an image or like a line, it's not attached to like a full, you know, piece or project yet. And so I'll just like write it down. And then sometimes, sometimes it's only days later, but sometimes it's years later. And I'll like suddenly this little few notes I wrote down, 3 years ago, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, that's a short story, and now I gotta write it. So, and some things, of course, never get turned into anything. I have myriad notebooks with just like little things in there that have never found a home. So I'm noticing a trend with like, oh, perpetual motion roadshow in my first book as a young kid and stuff. It's all been like sort of going, well, I might as well go for it. Like, what
Yeah.
have I got to lose, And this was the same way. My mom had actually seen in the local newspaper um, that they were, taking applications for the next like batch of poets laureate for Kenosha and Racine, because it's like the same board that selects for both counties. And she, gave it to me and suggested that I apply. And I was at the time I was kind of, I mean, I'd never stopped writing, but I didn't feel like confident. I hadn't like performed spoken word in years at that point because I had, moved back to the Midwest and then had a baby and just, wasn't. And also I really wasn't at the time I wasn't writing a lot of poetry. Like poetry, it was something I've always written occasionally, but it wasn't like my main focus. So I was kind of like, well, I'm not really a poet. I write poetry sometimes, but so I was kind of talking myself out of it. But then I went there was like a first Friday type like thing in my town where the guy who was like the then current and like outgoing poet laureate of Racine was like he had put on his like big final project for his tenure, I guess, at an art gallery, and it was where like he had paired up local poets with local artists, and they sort of responded to each other, and like the poets were there sharing you know their poems, and the artists were there showing their pieces. And but anyway, Nick Ramsey, who was the then poet laureate of Racine, got up and he was talking about the program, saying, we're taking applications. He had some there. And he said some comment about how, you know, don't like be scared off from applying, because if I can do it, then anyone can. And that really like is what got me to go, well, okay, maybe I will apply. I didn't think it would actually happen. Like I didn't think I'd get it, but I applied, and then I did.
That's really cool. And what did that involve?
The being the poet laureate. I had to do, like just there was like a certain number of events that I was expected to perform at. Like locally, which they kind of counted both Racine and Kenosha as local. And then I had to like set up, like do some kind of final project for mine. I did a zine of local poets. Shocking. There was actually supposed to be an event to go with it, but that never panned out because musicians, I don't know. And poets, actually, who am I kidding? But we the event sort of happened like a while later after I was no longer poet laureate. But and you know, I had to sort of be, I guess, they like literary ambassador to the county. Like I gave talks at like certain, you know, things for like youth and different, like there were some local organizations that would ask me to like write a poem for, you know, some event they were having and stuff like that. So it was, you know, things like that.
Awesome. So you just released a cassette. Tell us about that.
A couple years ago, yeah.
Oh, I thought that was more recently.
No, it was July of 2021.
Good
But
God. Okay, never mind.
well, that's okay. No, I'm still really excited about it. Yeah, self-portrait with ghosts and trains. It's Hello America. They stereo cassette. They are a cassette tape label. I mean, everything's also released digitally on Bandcamp. So for people who don't have cassette players, which is most people these days, you know, it can be like, you know, purchased digitally as well. But all the stuff they put out is in some way spoken word. Like some people, it's more like an audiobook, but then they also have like, you know, like some of the people on their label do sort of more like talking songs, you know, like where they write the music, but they're talking over it and like instead of, you know, singing. And then there, you know, I did one, it's all poems of mine. Some of them are backed up with music, others aren't. So they, you know, just all their stuff is somehow spoken word related. And they're, you know, and also cassette and digital only. So I can't really think of anyone else doing what they do right now. But yeah, I'm good friends with the guy who runs the label, and he approached me a couple years ago and asked if I'd like to do a tape sometime for them. So, and I was definitely all in. So
Nice. What else have you put out recently?
the most recent thing was the issue of my zine that I held up. That was in October. I mean, I've had stuff published like online, you know, various like online lit mags and stuff, but as far as like things like actual physical releases, yeah, October of last year was the most recent issue of my zine. And then last August, I was the first excerpt I read was from sort of the titular poem of this chapbook, Left of the Dial. And it was put out by Scumbag Press and out of England. And it was like, it's been sold out for ages because there was only like 30 copies. He does like really limited, you know, little print runs. But I do actually like have like a PDF, like a digital version of it that on my own like Ko-fi, like it's pay what you want, you know, so people can even just download it for free if they missed the you know, the original